All right, everybody, this is the Big Douglas Show. It is a preview Friday. We take on the Lions this Sunday. To get us all caught up and ready for that, we brought in Ben Standig from The Athletic. Ben, thanks for hopping on today.
Hey, Doug, I appreciate you having me on. I hope all is well. Week two, hope you looked at the tape, figured out what you got to work on this week, and improve, like everybody else.
I've done a little review of the tape, but we're going to try to get better every episode. Ben, stupid question of the day: who makes the best fast food French fries?
Wow, the hard hitting ones off the bat. It's hard to. Well, if we're just talking standard, sorry for moving my camera around. If we're just talking standard, I would say McDonald's is always pretty hard to argue with. But the Chick-fil-A waffle fries, like if we're gonna, if we're allowed to veer off, those are pretty good. So those would be my answers.
And completely different. So you're not really, comparing apples to apples. I like it. Another interesting one, Ben. Your profile picture, I believe, is you and Biz Markie. Is it a camera angle? Or he looks like he's very tall, or you're very short. One of the two. I don't know.
Yeah, that's on I think my Instagram one. I don't know. I'm like, 5'9", 6 foot with the Jufro, like Fletch would say. So yeah, he's whatever that is, or he was, right? I think he passed away. I obviously Bismarck, he was a legend. When I was a sophomore in college, one night I got written up in college because at 2 a.m, my roommate and I, perhaps we were a little inebriated, who knows, but we were singing loudly "You Got What I Need" at 2 a.m, and they came to write us up. So Bismarck, he's always had a soft spot in my heart. So I saw him at a Wizards game and had to make that move.
I love that. Ben, this year, finally back in the locker room. Explain to the folks watching just how important that is for your job. Not just because of, hey, we're around the players, but really, there's a totally different way of getting information out of players when you're able to be there with them, right?
Yeah, for sure. I was talking to Terry McLaurin the other day, and look, it's been weird for all of us the last couple of years, and for the players, they haven't had us in there at all. And for some guys, it's completely new. Terry McLaurin, of course, was around when we had open locker rooms. So, I was kind of making, icebreaker jokes with everybody the other day, in week one, I'm sure you're thrilled to see us again. And he's like, oh, no, it's cool, whatever. He's like, what do you think? And I was like, well, you and I wouldn't be having this conversation right now, right? If we weren't here. And, look, you try to talk to these guys on a basic human level. Like I talked to F.A. Obata yesterday, a little bit about the fact that, he had to play kind of all over the line when Darian Mathis got hurt. We also talked about the fact that, he's from England and the Queen died. And, I talked to Casey Toohill the other day, both about one of the plays that that I saw on tape about him and that I wanted to ask about. And he posted on Instagram that he got engaged this week. So, it is important, I think, for us to be able to talk to these guys as people and for them to see us as not just somebody who wants to potentially critique whatever just happened in the game, but also, hey, we're kind of going through this turn around the sun together. How's it going? What's new? So, I do think it's important, and hopefully, you build some trust along the way, and from that, have the opportunity to either, if there's news to be gotten, or just to have a better feel for what it is that these guys are going through or what happened in a given game.
Let's see. It's early in the season, so I know it's not huge, but we'll start each of these Fridays kind of with an injury report. What does it look like for Sunday for Washington?
Yeah, obviously we know Darian Mathis is out for the year with the torn meniscus. For this week, nobody has been ruled out yet, which is a step up for Cam Curl, who was ruled out last Friday with his thumb injury that required surgery. He was limited participant all week, but he did today at least do some ball drills with his other defensive back. So positive sign. The fact that Derek Forrest played as well as he did last week probably means they don't feel like they have to rush him, but needless to say, they want Cam Curl out there. Wes Schweitzer was also either out or limited most of the week with his hamstring injury. Those are the only two who are on the injury report. As far as the status goes, they're both questionable. Other than that, Cole Holcomb has a quad issue, but he's going to play. He told me yesterday. Trey Turner practiced in full. So did John Allen. So did Cole Turner. So, relatively speaking, they look to be in good health, and we'll just have to see, if Cam Curl in particular can go on Sunday.
I was talking with Al Galdi on Monday, and he brought up this, and I had to go back and check the transcripts. Ron says they rotated guards on Sunday on purpose for like health reasons, for getting in shape reasons. Ben, I don't think I ever in my life can recall guards being rotated, like some positions, but offensive linemen, that's not usually how it goes. Surprised by that? Is that gamesmanship from Ron? And do we really rotate guards on purpose?
So actually, I asked him about that today as well. So the basic answer is, as we know, all their interior linemen were basically beat up during this summer. Trey Turner missed almost all of training camp with a quad injury. Andrew Norwell and Wes Schweitzer both were out at various points, and we know of Chase Roullier, who did play the whole game, but he's coming off his leg injury. So Rivera basically said it was just because, look, these guys just had not had the reps to build up their game shape, I guess, to a degree. So this was an opportunity to try to get them as acclimated as possible and keep as good of a player on the field as they could. I don't know if they're necessarily going to do that this week. Obviously, again, we'll see if Schweitzer is able to go or not. Sadiq Charles would be the other guy to fill in. But yeah, it's not going to be a weekly bit once everybody is good to go. But, again, because they had this odd circumstance where all their guards had missed at least some point, that they felt they wanted to try to do that.
It's interesting. I know you talked to a lot of folks around the league before the season kind of got started. If you look at the numbers, there's this narrative, I think, that Carson Wentz just gives the ball up. And that's not necessarily true when you go back and look at the numbers. I'm surprised how down nationally folks are on Carson Wentz. How far do you think he went last week in correcting some of that?
Well, I mean, he obviously played pretty well. One game, good or bad, shouldn't define too much. I mean, look, the reality is, he's coming off a couple of pretty disappointing years in some capacity, whether, obviously like his stats last year, 27 touchdowns, 7 picks, seems pretty good, right? Even though the Colts didn't make the playoffs because they lost their last 2 games, it's not like they were a 4-win team or something. But as we saw a little bit last week, the ups and downs with Carson Wentz are pretty notable. And last week he didn't have one of those random left-handed throws under pressure, right? That kind of drives people kind of nuts. So maybe if people are saying he turns the ball over too much, maybe that's a bit of a misnomer. But in terms of being erratic, I think that's a fair assessment. The point I've made all along is, the guy that was, who was an MVP candidate back in 2017, who helped the Eagles get to the Super Bowl that year, that guy made more plays than, he made screw-ups, right? And that was kind of like a Brett Favre deal as well. When he was the best version of himself, he's making way more great plays, good plays, than he was the bad ones. But then at some point, that shift turned, and that's where Wentz was the last couple of years. So, it was a good effort in this one game. Of course, there was a big lull in the middle of the game. He threw the 2 picks to start the fourth quarter, and it really was almost a third one as well. So, it's ups and downs, but this was a game where he made more good than bad, and that's why you live with some of the mistakes, because they're going to come. You just have to hope there's just more of the good stuff.
Yeah, sign me up for 4 touchdowns and 2 interceptions every week, right?
Right.
You'd roll with that. Is Brian Robinson a human? Is he an actual human, or is he a space alien?
I have not seen the wires or the circuit breakers or anything on his body. I mean, it's crazy. Obviously, incredibly lucky to have gone through what he did and be here with us, let alone seemingly on track to play football again in the very near future. He was We've seen him out there all week riding the stationary bike, talking to the, working with the training staff. He was in the locker room the last couple of days when we've been in there, and he looks remarkably well. So it looks like again it's trending in the direction that he'll be able to play. He's eligible week 5. Whether he's off, he goes that week or not, we'll see. But yeah, it's remarkable that he's in this position, and obviously an incredibly fortunate young man.
The follow-up was JT Money from Twitter asked, do you have an idea? Do you think he's actually, ready to come back in 4 weeks? Sounds like he's on. I mean, it's hard to know now, right? But he sounds like he's progressing in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like he's progressing. Obviously, I think a lot of it is also going to be mentally, where's his confidence? I will just say that he seems pretty comfortable with his world right now. That we were in the locker room today. He and some of the other players were doing some college football trash talk based on their alma maters, and he has seemed to be pretty in pretty good spirits throughout all this. So if he can get by, if he can get through it from that perspective, then obviously once he's cleared, he should be good to go. Obviously, a big question will be, what happens when he gets hit on that leg, on that knee, or is there any, he clearly, as we were told, didn't suffer any significant structural damage, but how does he feel out there when he's having to make cuts or whatever? I think stuff like that, they probably won't know until he has to take some hits, but it looks like there's a reasonable chance he could play in week 5, but we'll just have to see.
Surprise, no Williams. I mean, I don't think he got a carry last week, and it felt like, like 2 weeks before when you hear Ron talking about, well, we think Williams can do a lot of things that Robinson can do. You thought, well, maybe they'll just roll with the particular game plan. That whatever the game plan was, it wasn't that last week. Were you surprised by that?
I was a little bit. I thought Jonathan Williams had a really good camp, and for me personally, I've been on the train even before they drafted Robinson, that they wanted to get some steadier running game going, because as we know with Antonio Gibson, very good player. It's just that he's a little more up and down, particularly when it's about running between the tackles. And even this past week, what did we see happen? We saw a big lull in the middle of the game where they weren't being able to sustain drives and so on. So I do think they want that element. I think Williams can give you some of that. On the other hand, right, if we're ranking their playmakers in order of best to not best, Jonathan Williams is going to come below those top 3 receivers, Gibson, McKissick, etc. And I guess to that end, there's something to be said for putting the ball in the hands of your best, your best players. If they had been able to sustain the lead they had at halftime into the second half, I wonder if we would have seen some of that. But since they were trailing, they leaned on Gibson, McKissick, etc. So, I think Williams could still get some work here over the next couple weeks, particularly if they have a lead. But I think there's some value in having a guy who can, help have some consistent plays, move the chains, kill some clock, whatever. And so I think he should have a shot to play, but we'll see.
It feels like we finally got a look at what a Turner offense looks like. A lot of passing on first down, a lot of motion, a lot of misdirection, more of this to come. Is this is what I always thought we were going to find with Turner, and I just don't think he had the weapons or the quarterback. Is this, I mean, where are you on the shock meter, as far as what they rolled out last week?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's been interesting because he's been creative in the past,
right?
But they haven't had the playmakers. So you can be as creative as you want, but will the other team respect it? And yesterday when we talked to him, I mentioned that sort of diamond formation that he had at one point with the 3 receivers in McKissick, and he was like, "Hey, we've run that before. Everybody's just making a big deal about it now." And I'm like, "Yeah, but part of that is because of who is out there." I was looking at this up the other day for a story I wrote that in the 3 previous years that Terry McLaurin was here, the number 2 receiver in terms of receptions in each of those years, Steven Sims, Cam Sims, and Adam Humphries, right? I mean, that's just very different than what they've got now with Curtis Samuel, Jahan Dotson, just off the bat, let alone, De'Ami Brown or Cam Sims, or not to mention the tight ends and all that stuff. So I I've been impressed with Scott Turner the last couple of years. I think people just probably haven't appreciated how little he's had to work with. And that's also, of course, at the quarterback position, right? I mean, Carson Wentz, again, ups and downs or not, he makes some incredible throws, as we saw. So, now the creativity seems more inventive because you have people that can help execute it more. And I think that was sort of Scott Turner's point, like, hey, we're not doing a lot of things that are completely different. Just we now have some other pieces. So, yeah, I think you're right. I think this was probably Scott Turner's been wanting and trying to run things a certain way. Now with the pieces he has, it looks prettier and more effective, and that's why it seems a little bit more different, and that's a good thing.
It's incredible to think that we may actually have an offense that scares defensive coordinators leading up, because it has been a while since this offense kept any defensive coordinator up at night. 3 catches for McKissic and 3 catches for Logan Thomas. I know only 2 to Terry. This is something that I think fans are going to have to get used to, right? That's what happens when you have a lot of weapons. They're just not going to all go – like the target share will be different each week, right?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, you would hope that the game plan will – you're always having – in the regular season, you're always focusing on what you do and what you have, but then you're also looking to see where is the opponent weak. And, this week, for example, Detroit has had struggles covering receivers down the field. So this could be a week where Terry McLaurin gets more targets than he did last week. But yeah, I mean, between the top 3 receivers, Logan Thomas, who was only in his first game back off of his ACL surgery, you've got 2 running backs that can catch a lot of passes, former receivers, and Brian Robinson, whenever he comes back, can catch the ball as well. And we'll even see, do they get Cole Turner involved? He was practicing this week after missing last week. So yeah, they have a lot of options. And, I know from the fantasy football community is not thrilled. They hate running back by committees. This may be to some degree receiver by committee. Ultimately, over a season, things will probably shake out the way we imagine, with McLaurin having the best numbers. But yeah, in any given game, Curtis Samuel had 12 touches last week. That tied his career high. Dotson, obviously 2 touchdowns in his first game. And Terry McLaurin was pretty quiet until the 49-yard touchdown. And, I think the other good thing is there's no diva vibes with any of these guys, certainly not McLaurin. So, that was only going to benefit the whole situation. They're not going to have to feel they have to try to force feed something. Though, obviously, as I said before with Jonathan Williams, you want the ball in the hands of your best players. But the good thing is they've got a lot of guys who on any given week could be that quote-unquote sort of best player.
Then you mentioned that Cole Turner is healthy and should be back. How many tight ends will dress on Sunday?
Yeah, I was sort of playing around in my head during practice, like who's going to be inactive this week. And I don't know for sure. I mean, if Schweitzer and Cam Curl can go, then they don't have anybody who would be ruled out strictly for injury. I mean, my guess would be 3 tight ends, just because of that aspect. Like, you can't keep everybody up, and you have 4, so kind of only need to have 3. So I guess the question would be, if Cole Turner is ready to go, would he be ahead of Armani Rogers? He obviously would have been, for most of the summer, but Armani Rogers played well throughout camp, and Cole Turner basically didn't play after a while. So that would be the one question there, is has Armani Rogers gotten to such a point where they stay with him over Turner? That I'm curious to see what happens, but I would probably guess 3, because like I said, you're going to have to find some healthy scratches this week one way or the other.
All right, let's pivot to the defense. For a man that hates talking to the media and hates it when Ron talks to the media, Del Rio dropped a huge soundbite this week. It's not that he's not wrong, but what are they saying kind of around the organization with this Del Rio quote on Jim and Davis?
Yeah, I mean, Ron Rivera today, I mean, so yesterday, I'm sure your viewers know, but yeah, yesterday I asked Del Rio in the press conference, basically what did he think of Jamin Davis? And he was like, he was kind of so expecting more out of him. And that led to more questions about him basically saying, look, I mean, it's not ideal to get a linebacker isolated on a receiver, as happened several times with Jamin Davis. But when you do, you're going to need to do a little bit more. Jamin Davis got, Christian Kirk caught 3 passes against him. Travis Etienne had a 20-something yard catch and should have had a touchdown, but Trevor Lawrence overthrew him. So today we get Ron Rivera, and sometimes Ron Rivera will dial back potential criticism. He didn't do that. He said the same thing. Like, we expect more out of Jamin Davis, and he talked about it's like a lot of fundamental stuff. They still see him as a guy that's going to break through at some point. He's obviously very athletic, but to me, like, I think part of it is they kind of gave him the kid gloves treatment last year. I wrote about that today on The Athletic, and it is here too. I mean, at some point you got to move forward, and this is a big year, obviously, for this organization. It's a big year every year, but third year for Rivera, that type of deal. So, on the one hand, they can't, you can't just sort of like a burp a young player through the season. You need him to start to do more than crawl. He needs to start walking. On the other hand, where are they going? Like, this is my issue. It's been for months. Like, their linebacker depth is, to my view, almost non-existent in terms of guys you could use. In regular down and distance. They didn't use another linebacker at all last week. So Jamin Davis not only needs to play well because of the investment that they made in him, but also I don't know where they're going to go if they feel like he can't get there. And let's not forget, he was like basically the only true starter that played in the third preseason game, and that was an indication to me right there that for all the talk of his improvement and all that during camp, that they still saw a guy who needed work, and clearly they still feel that way after week one.
The choices they've made have been, let's call it, interesting. I'm with you. It feels like they need help at linebacker. They tell you, pay attention because we don't think so, or else they'd have done something about it. It's fascinating to me. They've done the same thing with the D-line, Ben. Like, Phidarian Mathis goes out, and there are guys out there, veterans, that can play the position. They went out and got an undrafted guy out of Michigan and then bumped him up. Now, I appreciate the way Daniel Wise has played, but I got to tell you, I'm a little surprised that they haven't made any attempts to bolster the position group at all. What about you?
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir. And by the way, I appreciate you not yelling at me for drinking Gatorade. I'm feeling a little, I got to build up the electrolytes before the big game on Sunday. Yeah, I mean, I've been surprised as well. I mean, Phidarian Mathis was a rookie, so no experience per se on the NFL level, but he's a second-round pick, right? You're expecting him to have a certain level of talent to contribute. Donovan Jeter, who they just signed, also a rookie. So, okay, we can say the experience is essentially the same, and he played at a big school in Michigan, but he's an undrafted free agent who just got cut by Pittsburgh out of training camp. Like, if we had said an undrafted free agent made this roster at a training camp, I still wouldn't be expecting a ton out of him off the bat, but at least that player would have been with the organization for, months this year. This guy just showed up the other day, and he's on the active roster, and, you would have to imagine that they could give him some work this week, even if it's just a few snaps. And, yeah, I mean, it's not a guy that we have any real feel for. Can he get it done? Rivera said they like him because he's a pretty big guy, 325 pounds, a space eater, and they do need a little more size inside. I get that aspect of why this guy specifically, but, I mean, yeah, I'm just a little surprised that they didn't go for more of a veteran presence. I'm not saying it has to be like Ndamukong Suh, but like just somebody who's had like more experience. Even Justin Hamilton, who they had in training camp, he is a guy that has played in the NFL. I've lost track to see where he landed, but even like that, I've been a little surprised. But yeah, like you said, it's been kind of that way throughout pretty much the entire defense.
Payne had one of those games last week where you're like, yeah, this is the guy we were hoping for. Now, okay, I'm trying to figure out the best way, but I just do it like this. I think Ron prefers Payne to Sweat, but I'm not sure that you can pay two defensive tackles $18 million a year, because I don't know why Payne would take less than Jonathan Allen. If you could only pick one, which one would you pick, and which one do you think they will pick? You think there's any chance they actually figure out a way to keep both of them?
Yeah, well, so this has been my thing all along, has been realistically, yeah, you can do whatever you want. I mean, you can keep all four of the defensive linemen they picked in the first round, give them all extensions. You can do that, but then you're obviously having to cut back somewhere else. I mean, we just saw this with the Carson Wentz situation, how when you started to have to pay a quarterback, a lot of money, you have to cut back in some places. So I think in general, you would want to, like you said, paying defensive tackles is a bit aggressive. I think that's one reason they drafted Fedarian Mathis. So I would think on a certain just basic team building level, Montez Sweat and Chase Young would be the guys you would look to keep. But I kind of agree with you as well that, like, I think on some base level, Payne, just sort of the player he is, a little more consistent, would probably be a guy that they would like to keep. I kind of imagine Del Rio might even think that, and I don't know that for fact, but I know when Del Rio, like his first year, he told me that Daron Payne was a guy he just loved watching his tape. But I just don't know if you can get it done. Like, I've written about this a lot and reported about Daron Payne's contract situation a lot throughout the summer, and just the basic sense I've had was, from the start was, they're not going to get an extension done, and that will play out the season and see where they're at. And absolutely, if Daron Payne is the guy we just saw on Sunday throughout the season, and he's a Pro Bowler, they can, absolutely at that point, maybe you don't throw on the franchise tag, but you can still negotiate a contract. But at some point, you have to make a call. Are we really going to pay all four of these guys, or we're not? And I would still be in the camp. The answer would be no. So I would still guess that Payne moves on. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely a world where he could stay. But like I said, like I reported months ago, there was just not going to be an extension by the time the season started.
A couple more here. St-Juste played a bunch in the nickel. To me, he needs to be outside with the boundary to help him. I don't know where you're at on that. He scares me in the nickel. I don't think when I looked back at the tape this week, it didn't look to me like he had a great game. Your thoughts on St-Juste and being in that nickel spot?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be an interesting development. We had Chris Harris in today to chat with us, and he said he was, really liked what he saw from St-Juste. I mean, Jack Del Rio might come out and make some candid comments. I don't think we're going to get that from some of the position coaches. But yeah, I'm with you. I think it's going to be a work in progress. I kind of think on one level that when Cam Curl is back, right, we saw last year the 3 safety alignment worked out pretty well for them. And we saw what Derek Forrest did in the first game. And let's not pretend that Derek Forrest turned into Ronnie Lott overnight. He had some mistakes as well, for sure. And some even a little bit glaring in coverage that Jacksonville didn't take advantage of, but he played very well. And I kind of wonder if there becomes a point where it's just they would rather go with the 3 safeties than the 3 corners more often than not, but we'll have to see about that as it develops. I'm with you. I think in a perfect world, St-Juste is outside. I think that's why they drafted him that way. But Kendall Fuller played much better outside last year than he did in the slot. I think they would just want to keep him there. And then that leads to the issue of, well, what do you do with this guy? So they're trying him in the slot. There's also a lot of big receivers out of the slot, whether it's actual wide receivers or tight ends. So that could be an advantage or help at some point. It wasn't this week with Christian Kirk, a water bug type receiver, but going forward, that could be a thing. But I think the depth of this in the corner is questionable. They're going to need St-Juste to play at a pretty solid level wherever he is. And I think it's still a little bit up in the air, but I think there's some hope he's a talented guy, obviously.
One more before we get to Corey Lott's question and our score predictions. You brought it up. What do you think will be the plan this Sunday if Curl is able to play?
If he is able to play?
Mm-hmm. You think he does less work and is in that Buffalo while he's coming back with Forrest playing in the strong safety spot, or you think they'll automatically give Curl his job back and put Forrest down into that Buffalo spot?
Yeah, I mean, Cam Curl is going to play ahead of Derek Forrest whenever he is back. When they were going with the 3 safeties in camp, it to me looked like Curl was more closer to the line of scrimmage and Forrest was a little further in the back. So I would assume that's the way it goes. I asked Rivera the other day, what did they miss with Cam Curl out? And he mentioned his size around the line of scrimmage. So I think that's where he goes. Look, Detroit ran the ball very effectively in week 1. You would think to that degree, if you're concerned that could happen again and you're going to go with a sub package as they did every play last week, then having the 3 safeties might be the better approach because Cam Curl and to some degree Forrest give you more run help while still being able to cover, whereas St-Juste is, just more of a cover corner type. So I think it could be a decent amount of Curl and Forrest if Curl can go. But yeah, I mean, it's good to have options, and for the first time in some time in the secondary, they do have enough guys. It feels like to be effective. Get past those top six, and then I start to wonder. But if Curl's back, I think Curl and Forrest could be a pretty interesting combination.
All right, what's your biggest key to the game on Sunday? And let's get a score prediction from you.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think it's too complicated. I mean, they did a better job on third down last week, the third down defense, and the offense was effective there, so that's a good sign. But you take the win last week and you're happy with it and all that, but I still have a lot of questions. I feel like the Jags missed a bunch of plays last week on offense they could have taken advantage of. Obviously, Carson Wentz made some amazing throws down the stretch, but they needed to rally from an 8-point deficit to beat a team that had the worst record in the league each of the last 2 years. I just think from an offensive perspective, you got to just be a little more consistent. I think they recognize that as well, and especially that'll help the defense, kind of keep them off the field. So, I think if Carson Wentz can, I mean, look, this is, of course, if he can make the spectacular throws and be a little more consistent, that would be amazing. And if the defense can, shore up that run defense that was allowing Jacksonville 6.8 yards a carry last week, I think that's going to be huge. But we'll see if DeAndre Swift for the Lions, he missed practice for most of this week with an ankle injury. Last week in week 1, he faced very rarely did he face 8 players in the box, and that's probably going to be the case this week since Washington is only going to go with presumably the sub packages. So they're going to have to find a way, if they're going to go with a bunch of defensive backs, to help the line and the linebackers lock down that run defense. Prediction, boy, don't yell at me. I've got something like Lions, like 24-21. I'm not saying Washington can't win, of course. I just, I still have some questions, and Detroit obviously did some good things last week. They're at home. They feel like they're a hungry team. Not saying Washington isn't, but, just they're at home. So I'll go the Lions in a squeaker. But look, if Washington can win 2-0, going into Philly would be a pretty fun week around here.
No doubt. I think two things before we get out of here. I think that we'll look back at the end of the season, much like we did last year with the week 1 loss to the Chargers. And that Chargers team, I don't think a lot of people thought were going to be great last year, and they turned out to be pretty good. I think there's a chance that can be the same for the Jaguars this year, that they can actually end, and that'll look like a pretty good win. And then as far as Sunday goes, I don't know, call me a homer. I like something like 31-24 Washington. I'm excited to see the offense in a dome and be as fast as possible. So.
Yeah, I mean, look, the offense. It's been, I think, for a lot of us out here, the offense looks. We have less questions about the offense and the defense, and that obviously played out that way on Sunday. So yeah, I think it's not like Detroit's got a great defense. They gave up 38 points in their opener. They can be taking advantage of deep, and between Terry McLaurin, Dotson, Curtis Samuel, Washington has the weapons. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, I could, if you ask me who I think wins in an hour, I might switch my mind. But it should be an interesting game. I'm hoping one of these weeks we'll get some clarity where I can say definitively, this is where I think this team is at. I'm just not quite there yet. But, we'll see.
Ben, you're the best, man. I appreciate you giving me some time today. Everybody make sure you check Ben's workout at The Athletic. They've always got some kind of discount going on. You guys basically give the stuff away. It's incredible.
Something like that.
Something like that. What you got coming up on The Athletic? Are you flying to Detroit? Are you going out to Detroit?
Yeah, I will be in Detroit. Yeah, I mean, I don't have anything new coming up before the game. I wrote this week though about the fact that, especially on offense, Ron Rivera, back when they were looking for a quarterback, talked about how they got to get a better quarterback. But you also want to make sure you have enough weapons for when that player shows up that he can be effective. And based on week 1, it kind of looks like they did that. I mean, almost everybody on the offense, other than Jahan Dotson and Andrew Norwell, was already in place when they made the deal for Carson Wentz. So they did kind of have a lot of those pieces. The offensive line did a good job last week, I thought. protecting Wentz. And that's what makes this kind of interesting. The upgrades on offense went pretty dramatically, especially if you consider Curtis Samuel kind of new. So yeah, that was something I wrote this week. You can go check that out. Plus, I wrote about the Jamin Davis situation that went up this morning.
You mentioned the line just real quick. It's incredible to me that the Bears said no thank you to Charles Leno. Just said no, just no thanks and get out of here.
And the guy that they brought in that year, who I guess they thought would replace Leno, Tevin Jenkins. I haven't been paying that close attention, but he's been on the trade block, or I don't know what's going on with that, but like it's been pretty quick hook there. So yeah, that looks like a miscalculation, but that in the salary cap world that can happen sometimes, I guess.
Benny, the best man. I appreciate you. Have a good flight. Safe trip.
Doug, I appreciate it. Thanks, man.
All right.